You're listening to Productivity Protected, the podcast that's all about data privacy and security. We'll unpack emerging threats, hot issues in data security, and top ways to protect your data and how you work. Here's your host, Spencer Kupferman.
Welcome back, everybody, to Productivity Protected podcast here at PKWARE. I'm your host, Spencer Kupferman, the CEO at PKWARE. We've got a fantastic show for everybody today, a great subject with a fantastic guest. Our episode today entitled What CFOs Should Know About Data Breaches. This is a very critical subject, and we have a tremendous guest to speak to, Matt Zomboracz. Welcome, Matt. It's great to be here. It's kind of a quick aside. I've never actually had to say Zombo's name before, so I've had to practice before this podcast to figure out how to say this very, very complicated name. So he usually goes by Zombo at PKWARE. I'm going to refer to him as Zombo throughout our podcast, but I gave it a shot. It's the first time I've said his name since he's been here for almost 2 years now, and so that was probably the most challenging part of the podcast for me. So I'm glad I'm through that now. I want to welcome Zombo. So glad he's been finally able to join us here for a critical discussion for all of our users. Want to give a shout out to, of course, all of our customers out there, our loyal customers, our people who listen in from around the globe. Thank you so much for tuning in to another awesome episode here of Productivity Protected. Let me, if I can, give some background here on our guest. Zombo, like I said, is the CFO of here at PKWARE, bringing 20 years of experience in finance and accounting to the table. Prior to joining PKWARE, Zombo was the corporate controller at ARI Network Services, now operating as Lead Venture. For those of you who are familiar with ARI Network Services and Lead Venture, a leading provider of end-to-end digital solutions for dealers and OEMs of complex equipment. Zombo was heavily involved in a leveraged buyout of ARI and the transition from a NASDAQ-listed company to a private equity portfolio company. And that's very appropriate for those of our listeners out there know that PKWARE is a private equity backed enterprise by Thompson Street Capital Partners based out of St. Louis, Missouri. So his experience was very timely. We're very fortunate to have Zombo join us. And a little more background here on Zombo. Prior to ARI, he worked at Quad Graphics, which is a New York Stock Exchange traded company, as an international and technical controller, and began his career at PwC, Price Waterhouse, for all of our PwC listeners out there, where he spent 10 years in the audit and capital markets group, practices serving multinational public companies as well as private companies before moving on. Zombo's got a CPA, he's a licensed CPA, and an MBA and a BBE. There's a lot of acronyms in there. I want everybody to keep up with me here. A lot of acronyms to follow, but we're just getting started. And that's all. That was a BBE in finance, which he achieved from the University of Wisconsin in Whitewater. So I'm sure we have a lot of University of Wisconsin Whitewater alum tuning in here. That's a great plug for the alumni network there. And Zombo, great to have you here. More importantly, feel fortunate that you're part of our team here at PKWARE. And I think I speak for all of us that we feel that we are, from a financial perspective, in great hands. Really very responsible, professional, and knowledgeable, not just on finance, but from a strategy perspective. Zombo chips in a lot of different areas for us and provides solid leadership. So with that, would like to welcome Zombo to our Productivity Protected podcast. His first pod. I think it's the first podcast he's ever done. I know he's a little nervous about it, but he's going to be fantastic. It's going to be fantastic. Zombo, welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Spencer. Thanks for the great intro and the kind words. Yeah, I guess as you say in the radio business, first time caller, first time podcaster. I'm excited to get into the topic. I think it's very important for small, medium, and large businesses. And what the cost of a breach is, and what CFOs and the rest of the organization should know.
And you're right, Zombo, because I think there's maybe a bit of a misconception out there that people think that CFOs in this day and age are responsible for bean counting and those types of duties, debits and credits, et cetera. I think what we're going to dive into here today is really understanding that that position has the responsibilities around cyber hygiene. And ensuring that we're doing all we need to do, and that our listeners in their businesses, if we have CFOs listening, which I hope we do, that those CFOs understand that they need to continue and expand their vigilance around their cyber hygiene as it relates to what CFOs should know about data breaches, which is exactly the title of our podcast. So appreciate you joining us here. Like I said, what CFOs should know about data breaches. We're going to jump right in, Zombo, with some questions here, and we'll go back and forth for our listeners to dive in here. We're going to end up with some great content here. Hopefully CFOs and others around the globe are able to apply this type of mentality in the practical application of some of your experiences here. So I'm looking forward to diving in. Let's go ahead and get started. According to IBM, a recent cost of a data breach report, the average cost of a data breach globally is $4.24 million. But in the United States, it actually is double that, Zombo. It's about $9 million. That's a lot of money. I think we'd all agree that's real money. What are some of the line items companies see when they're tallying up the cost of a data breach?
Thanks, Spencer. That's a great question. I think, really there's four main kind of drivers of the cost of a data breach. It's detection and escalation, which is really all the spend you spend on software or implementing policies and procedures to detect and then report up a data breach to the executives or management of the company. And then after something's been detected, there's a ton of other costs as well. There's the cost of notifying your regulators if you need to, right? If you're CCPA, GDPR, PCI, all those companies that are under those standards have regulators, and they need to notify them in certain situations, whether data was taken or not, just if they had a breach. And if they don't do that in a timely manner, there can be fines and other costs associated with that as well. So it's very important that they follow kind of the rules and regulations of their regulators. And then after that, it's just, what do you do to respond, right? So if you've gotten your data stolen, how do you replace it? If you've gotten hardware that you can no longer use, you need to kind of wipe it and back it up, and then also kind of remediation of the breach. So if you've had PCI data stolen, where there's customer data that's in the hands, you need to provide stuff like credit reporting and other kind of remediation efforts to your customers. And then the last one, and sometimes the largest, is really just kind of your lost business, whether your equipment is down and you can't kind of produce if you're a manufacturer, or if you're a software company, you have a loss of reputation, customer churn, which is a huge metric here at PKWARE, and then just losing new business as well. So those are the main kind of drivers of the cost of a breach.
Wow, I mean that's there's a lot going on there, and we can continue to drill down there. And like I said before, as you talk and explain these items around the cyber hygiene for data breaches. And the steps taken, people start to realize very quickly that a CFO has to be prepared to do more than just balance the debit credits and forecast the budget. So appreciate that. Let's keep going with that. Some people might be surprised to learn that a CFO's role overseeing a company's funds make them the one qualified or authorized to sign off on certain risks, including how data is handled, because data can create risk to the company's finances, as we know. Is that something you experienced directly or indirectly in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. I mean, I think as as we're as CFO stewards of the company's capital and allocating it, what we spend and what policies we put in place around data and hygiene and protecting that data is definitely in kind of my purview and others as well. I'd also add, right? I mean, with the managing risk with the insurance market, right? I'm responsible for kind of overseeing what insurance that we, insure our shareholders and owners for with regards to cyber. And I know, as everyone's out there, that market has become a lot more expensive and a lot more difficult to even get coverage at times. But some of the policies that we have in place, I won't go through all of them, but it's really, we train our employees and monthly, weekly on the social engineering aspect of data breaches. I know everyone, as everyone probably knows, a lot of breaches occur. I think there was just one in the news today about Uber where an employee was texted and provided some password information. So we vigorously train our employees to really watch out for phishing emails, not just in finance, but everyone in the organization. I think in finance, with some of the, cash related stuff in AP, we've gotten that training for a while, but now it's throughout the organization. And then it's just maintaining, policies and procedures for when data should be taken, from where it's stored and put into an environment. If an engineer is going to work on it, there needs to be a check-in, check-out policy. And then we need to make sure that data is, encrypted, both where it's stored and on that, wherever it is.
That training you're referring to, Zombo, in-house, I'm in the middle of taking that training. So I can speak to trying to acquire the knowledge to be vigilant about the phishing and the ransomwares and all of these nefarious activities that we're exposed to. So appreciate that insight. I guess, how is that changed now, that you're a CFO for a cybersecurity company? I think that's an interesting irony. Being a CFO and the focus obviously on, there's an F in the middle of your title for financial for a reason, but you are a CFO of a cybersecurity company. What would, tell us a little bit about, you were at ARI, you were at other places. You've had a lot of experiences, whether it was PricewaterhouseCoopers, 10 years there. You've had a lot of different experiences. You've seen a lot, public and private sector as well. What are publicly traded versus privately held? And so, your eyes have seen a lot of stuff. Tell me how that's changed now that you actually have to, be a CFO, and I guess, what do they say? Eat your own dog food. I don't like that, because humans shouldn't eat dog food, but that's what they say. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I'd say we need to practice kind of what we preach, if you will. Maybe that's a better analogy for you. Yeah, absolutely. It always needs to be at the front of our mind. We're in the cybersecurity space. Everyone's at risk to be, have a breach or have, an attack, but and it costs every company differently. But our loss of reputation from an attack would be, in my opinion, greater than if we weren't involved in the space. So we just need to make sure that we have all the policies in places. We make sure that employees are educated and have the software as well as the knowledge to execute on those policies, so we don't have a breach. And then we need to continue to make sure we have the best software. Not we use our software internally that we sell, but that's not a one-stop solution. We also have other software that continues to monitor where our data lives, to make sure people aren't trying to attack it. And if they do, we're notified very quickly.
I think I'm going to just take a leap of faith here, Zombo. Just bear with me. I think what I hear you say is, for all of our listeners out there, is that people should start this process by purchasing PKWARE. I think that would be very helpful. to have the PK Protect platform. It is our podcast. I think I'm not violating any copyrights by saying that, or any of our network deals or advertisers, by saying that folks should get smart and acquire the PKWARE platform known as PK Protect, used by Fortune 100s around the globe, banks, insurance companies, manufacturers, you name it, different verticals, and that this is a start, because whether it's encryption or discovering, detecting data, remediating data, masking data, whether dynamically or static, we can provide that capability. So with that, my takeaway also in the last couple of questions was the fact that this is, solving for this is actually a business problem, and it's a challenge rather, that has to be met. And it's not just specific to IT. As you just referenced, our entire company gets educated on this. This is everybody. Everybody is making sure that they're doing everything they can do to make sure that they're vigilant about different nefarious attacks in our cyber hygiene as a company. It's not just the responsibility of IT. What are maybe you could elaborate on what some of the other non-monetary breach effects that CFOs have to deal with when their company does come under attack?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Spencer. I think, there's a lot of soft costs associated with a breach, right? Internal time, right? I mean, just the IT department, legal, finance, every organization needs to get involved if there's a breach and respond to it. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen in business, during business hours all the time. So it's just all hands on deck, and that has a drain on people doing their day jobs, if you will. There's also just the IP aspect of it, right? If you lose your intellectual property, your recipe for making a drug, or et cetera, or anything, it could cause countless dollars of damage to an organization. Those are just a few. I mean, plus as I talked about a little bit earlier, the loss of trust in the market, right? That's again hard to quantify, but if we were in a deal and someone was ready to buy and we had an issue, I would imagine that company would, take a second look at buying our product because we had a breach, or any product out there.
I appreciate that. Appreciate that feedback in that perspective. And there is a tremendous amount of soft costs, as people can see, associated with these types of attacks, and you read about them every day. Unfortunately, the dollar amounts get the big headlines, the splashy headlines, but you're right. The soft costs are serious. They're meaningful, and potentially very detrimental to the bottom line of your business. We hear a lot about cyber attacks that are inevitable, but just because someone attacks a company doesn't mean that they'll get what they're after. That the hacker is necessarily going to be successful. Rather, depending on how the organization has secured its data. Of course, everybody has a different security profile from that perspective. What are some of the best ways that CFOs can help their organizations be the best prepared for the inevitable, which in my humble opinion, from what I've seen, being a part of this company, which I know people, we're constantly under threat because we're a cyber company and because of the types of customers, that we do have. And so we take very, very strong precautions. From the CFO's perspective, what should they be doing to get their organizations as prepared, for example, as we are?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the first thing is approve the purchase of PK Protect when your CISO or IT department asks for it. I think all in jest. I mean, that's one thing. Obviously, we should push for, but just around the budget, you need, us as CFOs, right? We put together a budget and we try to manage costs. I think this is something you shouldn't skimp on as an organization, right? It's, a dollar spent today could save you hundreds tomorrow if you invest in, people, processes, and, systems to prevent these attacks. Not only prevent, but in the, like, as you mentioned, in the case of a breach, there's a lot of people smarter than I out there that are pushing kind of a zero trust platform, which is you kind of assume you're already breached, and then what do you do in that event? And that's where kind of planning comes in. That's where PKWARE and some other software products come in. Discovery. A lot of companies, I think, in the IBM report or another report I read, 90% plus of companies don't know where all their sensitive data is. So if you don't know where it is, it's kind of hard to put together a plan to protect your data. So first step is really identifying where your sensitive data is and either moving it to a different spot if it's in the wrong spot, or protecting it where it is if it needs to be there. And then what do you do with protection? That's encryption when it moves and when it's at rest, which is a sweet spot of the PK Protect platform. So then, I liken it to, if someone breaks into your house and you have all your most important information in a safe that's fireproof, and that has a lock on it, they're going to break into the house, which sucks, and you'll probably have to call the police and report it, but you're not gonna lose your most valuable assets, right? They might get some clothes, which you can replace, which isn't ideal, but they're not going to take your IP or your PII or PCI information. And then it's employee education as well. What happens, when we get a breach? It needs to be reported quickly, so you can respond. I think, it's amazing. If you look at the data, it takes almost a year for a lot of people to not only identify, but then remediate a breach. So if you can shorten that window, that'll save you money, both in time as well as lost data. And then I'd say the last thing is really putting in those monitoring solutions. One of the things that's pretty cool about PK Protect is it has a lot of analytics built into it, where you can see abnormal behavior with users. So if my user is attacked, for example, and the IT department can tell that Matt unencrypted 300 files today, and he usually does 2 a week. So that's a valuable tool that customers can use to really look at their environment and determine where there's abnormalities, which would help them identify a breach sooner.
I think that your analogy around your house and getting broken into and having the valuables, that makes a lot of sense to me. Hope for our listeners as well. I think that's a critical, maybe your most critical point and message here on the show today. As we're running out of time, I would just pose this final question to you, Zombo, for our listeners, which is, whereas historically this idea of cyber hygiene was maybe once a board meeting or once a year, or that type of level of vigilance, would you say it's fair to say now, from the CFO's perspective, as you collaborate with our IT leadership, do you see this as being more of it's an everyday collaboration to make sure that we are doing what we need to do in order to secure our interests as a company?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a daily thing that everyone needs to keep in the back of their mind. When they're getting emails, right? Everyone's getting smarter from a social engineering perspective. When they're getting text, it needs to be at the forefront of everyone's mind. And it's not just IT's job to prevent a breach. It can happen anywhere. And then the other thing, I just like to add with regard to kind of my fellow CFOs out there, if you think about kind of cyber as managing risk, it's like, you can buy some insurance for cyber risk, but you need to put those policies in place and, buy the tools necessary to reduce your risk. It's you wouldn't go without kind of an umbrella policy as a business. This is as important as that. And, maybe 10 years ago, a lot of people are like, well, it's not going to happen to me. You can't take that mentality anymore. It's if you're not protected, you're going to get breached, and it's going to cost you a lot more. And you would have wished you put stuff in place earlier.
There you have it, folks. You heard it right from Zombo, the CFO of PKWARE, a market leader in the cyberspace. You heard it right from him that this is not just IT's responsibility. This is a team effort. The CFO is, as you've seen over the course of the last 30 minutes or so, the CFO is right in the middle of this, and rightfully should be, from a risk mitigation perspective and a host of other protocols that we need to be vigilant on. The CFO has to lead that charge. I'm happy and proud to say that Zombo does. Hope you other CFOs out there will, if you're not doing it already. I want to thank all of our listeners from around the globe, our customers, partners, for tuning in to this awesome episode. What do CFOs, when there's a data breach, what roles the CFO play in that? This is, like I said, at such a critical time in the market. If you just look around what's happening in the world today, this is an exceptionally critical time to have this discussion. I'm glad that we were able to get you, Zombo, on the Productivity Protected podcast for the first time. I hope you'll come back and be a visitor now that you're a pro. You're like, it's no big deal for you now. You could just do one of these a day and talk about different subjects around data breaches. You're a real pro. Thank you so much for the content and the contribution and being with us today. Thank you so much. And like I said, I do hope you'll come see us again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to come back. Not quite ready to quit my day job and host a podcast like you, Spencer, but definitely would come back. Awesome.
Thank you so much. And again, for everyone out there, hit us up at podcast. That's podcast at pkware.com. If there's content you want to hear, if there's speakers and guests you'd like us to have on, we want feedback. This should be interactive. We kind of talk here. We do all the talking on the podcast, but between the podcast episodes, we'd love to get feedback and interest from our audience, from our users of our software, from our customers and partners, our strategic partners that are plentiful. We appreciate your partnership. Don't hesitate to drop us a line, drop me a line, drop Zombo a line. This has been a lot of fun. Again, thank you to everybody. I'm your host, Spencer Kupferman, the CEO of PKWARE. We've got an awesome guest next time. Of course, I say that every time. We only have awesome guests. That's all we can do. That's the best we can do, is have awesome guests. So I hope you'll tune in next time. Appreciate everybody being here. Thank you very much, Zombo. Thanks for jumping in. Appreciate it. Great content. I'll see you in Milwaukee. Thanks again for tuning in to Productivity Protected.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Productivity Protected. Learn more about how PKWARE protects data and workflows by visiting pkware.com, and join us next time for more insider info on protecting data wherever it lives and moves.